2.5 weeks is hardly long enough to make a complete study of economic and social conditions in some of the countries of Western Europe. But in that brief time, one can report observations while there that might be of some interest to Americans footing the bill for European recovery. We were privileged to serve as a J.C. delegate and KTUL correspondent to the Fourth World Congress of Junior Chamber International, which was held in Brussels, Belgium, the last week in April. Representing Tulsa with Clay Roberts, president of the Tulsa J.C.'s, we were pleased to reveal that international headquarters of the Junior Chamber of Commerce would be established in Tulsa, with Frank Pfister, Tulsa, as Secretary General. And here follows a brief story of our tour, the people we talked with, and some of them by recording will talk to you, experiences we would like to share with you. Our goodwill tour started from New York to Bermuda, thence to windy Santa Maria Island in the Azores, and finally London. The flight over gave us an opportunity to start practicing our Operation Democracy, for 10 nations were represented among the plane's passengers. All of them served as a cross-section study of people of the world, and all obviously sympathetic to our purpose, to promote friendship and sell the American free enterprise system to everyone we met. In London, we utilized our day-and-a-half visit to the fullest, trying to absorb as much of the British atmosphere as we could. The impressive and colorful changing of the King's Guard at Buckingham Palace, the Tower of London, the Crown Jewels, beautiful St. Paul's Cathedral, the old curiosity shop of Charles Dickens, the things we had read or heard about. And we observed the skimpy restaurant menus, perhaps a cause for the gloom that seemed to spread over the city, a feeling of depression that seemed evident. The people we met were not necessarily unhappy or dissatisfied, however, just accepting their heavy rationing, of not having enough of the best food, accepting the government's austerity program as a necessary thing temporarily. But Piccadilly Circus, the Times Square of New York with its lights recently restored, was fairly alive with activity. And we talked with some of the people about their nationalization programs. One such person was British newsman Don Ricketts, and when we asked him his opinion, he said,
"Well, my own opinion, I'll take medicine first. The new National Health Service seems to be going very well on the whole, but people think that they aren't getting enough for their money. They're trying to get rather too much. They all think that they can get their new spectacles and new teeth just because they're paying something each week. But they're a bit too hasty about it, and I don't think they realize how much it all costs and how much it affects the production of those things. And people just can't cope with it to keep up such a high rate of demand as the people have been making since the scheme started."
Aboard an English Viking plane 25 minutes out from London, we passed the white cliffs of the English coast. 20 minutes later, we're flying over the French coast town of Dieppe, remembered for the United States commando raid during the war, and landed at Paris only 1 hour, 15 minutes from London. It was Easter morning in Paris, and like Easter morning in most places over the world, activity was at a standstill. But we enjoyed the splendor of the buildings, the beautiful Notre Dame Cathedral and the familiar Eiffel Tower, an experiment in steel, and nearly in the shadow of the Arc de Triomphe, where our delegation placed a wreath on the tomb of the unknown soldier, we had dinner at a typical French sidewalk cafe, a dinner certainly comparable to any we have enjoyed in the United States. Expensive, yes. 2,000 francs, or about $6, but from all appearances there was plenty of food in France, as much difference as day and night when compared with London. And we talked with French people, too, those that could speak English anyway. One such man was Michel de Giron, a well-educated young man employed as an airline representative. He said his income amounted to about $125 a month, and if he didn't have a cheap room to sleep in, he wouldn't be able to eat regularly. And yet food aplenty in France. It was a little hard to understand. And how did the people feel about the fight for peace and their improvements since the war? With a tape recorder on a busy street in Paris, my colleague Clay Roberts interviewed several people. One man said,
"Well, the cause of fighting for peace is much more interesting than fighting for wars."
You're really right there. We're all interested in fighting for peace.
Yes.
How would you say actually living conditions are here now in comparison with the way they were during the war?
Well, I must say they've improved. The French people have gone leaps and bounds. Bridges are being built up like magic. A few years ago, there wasn't a bridge standing. And now the trains are running regularly without a minute in good time.
And a shop employee, a young lady with good education and background. She spoke 5 languages. What were some of her comments about America? And when Patricia DeBoss was asked if she liked the American people, she said,
Yes, I like the way they act mostly. I wouldn't say I like all of them, but of course you cannot judge a nation by some of their people. You just judge the people you know. And I think that they're just swell people, and I would like to go over there and just live there and see them for myself.
And we continued to question Miss DeBoss, discussing general conditions in France, the cost of living, her personal expenses, etc. And when we asked if she would mind telling us what her job in the shop paid, she said,
Exactly 12,800 francs per month.
12,800 francs. Well, that in American money is about $50 a month. That seems awfully low. Isn't it hard for you to get along on that?
It is impossible for someone young, which is working honestly, to get along in Paris, in this bit of what everyone else might say.
Well, thank you on that. I just wonder, what kind of rent do you have to pay out of that?
8,000 per month, just for a room, no bath. Well, it's nice and clean and decent, but it's just a wonder how people can get along when they have to pay so much rent and the food and so forth when they're just making so little wage.
And then, interested in knowing if she was happy with current conditions in France, she commented not only on her personal problems, but offered an opinion on the general picture in her country. She was asked,
How about living conditions? Are you happy with the actual conditions as they are here?
No, I wouldn't say I'm happy. I am leaving because, well, you have to leave. But I believe that every young people is not optimistic, but pessimist. Has, when you're working, you just turn around from one way to the other, and you just can't see how well you can get along with so little you're making. For the food condition, the one who's got money can have just as much as probably in the States, but the working people do not get much.
But the city of Paris handed an official welcome to the 130 American delegates on their way to the J.C. Congress in Brussels, and Tulsa did its share in capturing the spotlight when at a City Hall reception we presented a beautiful 30-feather Indian headdress to Pierre de Gaulle, the mayor of Paris. Later, in Brussels, where we presented another headdress to Belgian Premier Spock, we noticed that a picture of de Gaulle wearing the chapeau appeared on the front cover of a leading magazine, Match, the life or look of Paris. And while in Paris, we were part of a group to visit the children's hospitals, where we brightened little faces by giving the children candy and gum and pictures from America. Before we left France, we observed a French exposition which displayed consumer goods from all the provinces in the country, and it was interesting to note that industrial representation at the exposition was nil. Oh, there was a potato peeler, a small electric transformer model. But the train trip from Paris to Brussels provided an opportunity to view a rich agricultural area of France, many small farms, but most of the cultivation was done by hand, very little evidence of farm machinery. Arrival in Brussels was very nearly like arriving in any American city. Belgium was hard hit during the war, but the quality of the people, their joy of being alive, and their sturdy, cheerful optimism has enabled them to be among the first to recover in Europe. And economic recovery of Belgium is marked by a vigorous effort of intellectual and artistic recovery. Belgium's exports hit an all-time high last month, accomplished, so say economic experts, by increase in ERP purchases by Marshall Plan countries. The Belgian government reports that unemployment is waning and prices falling. Once a poor man's playground, Belgium is still, however, a land where millionaires fear to tread. With news that the number of unemployed had decreased, experts opined that a threatening recession had been averted. There's no nationalization in Belgium, and although the present coalition is made up of Catholic and Socialist Party members, The former still constitutes a majority which would defeat any nationalization attempt of key industries. Taxes in Belgium are fairly steep. The average worker's salary has about 9% deducted each month for Social Security funds and nearly 5% for state taxes. A new American car is subject to an average $100 annual use tax, and gasoline is about 60 cents a gallon, while in neighboring Holland it is only about 35 cents a gallon. And what do some of the people of Brussels say in regard to their country? We interviewed Mr. Fernand de Metz on the Brussels radio for KPUL. He's a young and successful businessman and son of the governor of Brabant province, of which Brussels is the principal part. We asked Mr. Demetz if he had any explanation for Belgium's rapid recovery since the war, and he said,
on the day of liberation, every Belgian man began to work, and work hard, you see, to get Belgium back as it was before the war. And the second point is that our Minister of Finance, Mr. Gut, took all the money of the men who collaborated during the occupation with the Germans. With this blockage of all the banks and all the accounts, and I think that those are the two main points of it.
Interested in knowing what the Belgians think about the future, any possibility of war, any feeling of depression among the people, we went on with our interview with Mr. de Metz and asked, do you feel that there's any depression, fear among the people of Brussels, and Belgium, that is?
Well, actually, I think that everybody is a little afraid of a new war that can happen. And anyway, we hope that our American friends will help us if something.
What is your reaction to the Atlantic Pact? John Ben mentioned a moment ago.
Well, I'm glad that the Atlantic Pact was made, but I think that we are in a bad place for that eventual war. You see, we are too close from the Russians. And I'm afraid that if a war breaks out, we won't have time to be saved by the Allies, you see. We will be invaded once more and perhaps occupied for some years.
And we talked with laboring people of Belgium. One such man was Camille Desrimeau, 34 years of age, employed at an iron foundry near Brussels. He lives in an adequate 5-room house with wife and 2 children. On his $80 monthly salary, the family usually eats a simple meal of soup, potatoes, meat, and vegetable. Little changed from a year ago, except that now bread and butter are no longer rationed. Camille said he has been economizing ever since the liberation to buy new beds for his children, hopes to get them by this summer. Camille didn't know much about the Marshall Plan, said he had heard about it, but didn't know whether it was helping his family. He said, that's the thing the communists are against, isn't it? And he didn't know whether the government was making the best of the plan, nor could he say what effect it had had on the morale of the workers. But he confessed this: I feel America is calling the tune for everyone else. And then there was 49-year-old Omer Del San, a semi-skilled railroad worker, received 5% raise last year, which now gives him $100 a month. And what does Omer think of the Marshall Plan? In his words, everyone is talking about it. I know it's a question of dollars, but for me, I don't see them. And he said with or without the plan, he felt a dependence on the United States. And what do some of the other people of Brussels think of the Atlantic Pact, cost of living, and etc.? Through the facilities of the Brussels radio, we talked with some of them on a busy street, right in front of the Metropole Hotel in the heart of their thriving, very American-like capital. Of the Atlantic Pact, one man said, what is your reaction to the Atlantic Pact, sir?
I'm very glad to hear it. I hope and I think this will be the only thing to save us from war.
I see. What do you feel about the Marshall Plan through the Western European countries?
Though the Marshall Plan is a good thing, it helps a lot for all the countries.
I see. Well, thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Someone else here that we might speak with?
Anybody speak English around here? I do.
Here's a gentleman who speaks a bit of English.
Yes, well, I've lived abroad most of my life, in Ireland and in Egypt. And I've lived here for about 6 months, and I find that there's been great progress made in this country, and I think most of it is due to, Belgium and America, I think. I think that America helped Belgium after the war because of the Congo and Antwerp. Antwerp was lent, as we all know, to the Americans. The fall of Germany, or before the invasion of Germany rather. But I think that the Atlantic Pact will tie not only Belgium and all the other countries together, but will also keep out not Russia, not the Russian armies, which Russia has no intention of, because Russia has no intention of invading Belgium, but will stop an internal revolution like Czechoslovakia.
There seemed to be a variance of opinion. Although the man you just heard was of the opinion that the Russians would never invade Belgium, others felt differently. We moved into the crowd and spoke to another who first told us about his business. What do you do here, sir?
I'm importing cigarettes.
Do you find it
Yes.
difficult to get American cigarettes over here?
Yes.
What are they selling for here in Brussels?
In Brussels, 15 francs, 18 francs, and 21 francs.
18 francs for the popular American cigarettes. That's equivalent to about
Yes.
30 cents, is it? Not in American
for
money?
every kind of American cigarettes, let me see, Camel, Chesterfield, and other kinds, Philip Morris.
Yes. What is your reaction to the Atlantic Pact, sir? Do you think it's going to be leading to peace or to war?
That's, in my opinion, one day there is another war.
There will be another war?
That's my opinion.
And how long do you think that'll be?
It will not last long.
I mean, how long do you think it will be before there might be another invasion of Belgium or another war in Europe?
I'm afraid it will be in the future. At any rate, there are many clouds in the sky.
Many clouds and dark ones.
Yes, bad. Yes,
I see.
that's my opinion.
Uh-huh.
I've foreseen the two other wars because I was teaching before. So I have foreseen the two other wars, and now, unfortunately, I'm afraid there will be another war.
It was an interesting experience. We wish, though, that we could have carried on in French as well as some of those people tried to speak English. We talked with other people every time we had the chance. A sales lady in a smart Brussels shop voluntarily said this: "Why don't you Americans drop an atomic bomb on Russia and get it over with?" And we asked if she thought Russia would ever invade her homeland. She answered, "Certainly I do." And we talked with other leading businessmen of Brussels, one man with 30 stores throughout the country, and he said, if war should come with the Russians and they should invade this country, many of us will get out as fast as possible. What would be the use to try to stay here and make a defense stand with our inadequate Air Force and Army? And he also volunteered this opinion, that the United States War Administration appeased Russia too much and never should have allowed the Russians to occupy Berlin first. Said we wouldn't have the trouble we have today in Berlin if the American armies hadn't been ordered to slow their offensive and let the Russians take the German capital. More than just one man was of that opinion in Belgium, and in France too, for that matter. But we found the people of Belgium particularly friendly and obviously very grateful for what America had done for them during the war. That was the feeling especially in the town of Bastogne, a town liberated by the Americans just prior to the Belgian bulge push of German General von Rundstedt. There in that town, we were thrilled to see the Stars and Stripes flying atop a pole in the city's main square, and we were given a warm reception in the Hall of Honor located in the city's administration building, where our state flag was on display with other state flags honoring American war dead. And high on a hill just outside the town, a magnificent shrine was under construction commemorating the American soldiers who gave their lives to help liberate the town. And our goodwill tour through the Belgian Bulge battle area was evident at the town of Rochefort, where our delegation placed a wreath at the foot of a bullet-riddled memorial for the town's war dead. And we went on through the little village of Bond, where you may recall 34 young Belgian boys were massacred by Germans, and a tour to Antwerp along a brick highway arched with ancient trees, a highway along which we saw more than one German concentration camp. One, our Belgian driver told us, served as an execution place for 842 Belgians. And as we made the side trips through the country, it was interesting to notice that to the north of Brussels, the signs along the road and in the towns all were in Flemish, and the trips to the south and west into the so-called Walloon section, the signs were in French. Brussels itself is predominantly French. Among the other side trips made during our stay in Europe was a very impressive one-day tour through immaculate Holland, through the land of tulips, windmills and wooden shoes, and literally thousands of bicycles. We were told 10 million inhabitants in the country, 7 million bicycles. They were especially noticed in Amsterdam and Rotterdam. The people were friendly everywhere we went, and we enjoyed showing our friendship for them. The highways in Holland are very modern, and I must admit superior to some we find here in Oklahoma. And we found a 4-lane highway when we went into Germany. It was the famous superhighway of Hitler's called the Autobahn, now being used for truck transport since the Berlin blockade was lifted. But when we traveled over the highway, we found many sections partly destroyed by bombing, many overpasses completely gone, necessitating detours, but repairs were being made. And when we first went into Germany, and while we were stopped at the frontier for investigation to show our credentials, we talked with a German officer on duty there, and he told us about a man who had just been shot by sentries 2 hours before we arrived. The wounded man was trying to smuggle coffee and other hard-to-get food into Germany to be sold on black market. The very friendly German, overly friendly it seemed a bit to us, said that thousands of smugglers do manage to get past the sentries in the wooded sections of the frontier. And in Germany, we went through what remains of the town of Aachen, the first town our armies invaded just inside the German frontier. Virtually every building in the town gutted and very little evidence of reconstruction, few people on the street, no automobiles to speak of, and we found the large cities of Cologne and Offenbach dark and dismal, and an atmosphere of broken spirit prevailing among the people we saw on the streets. It's hard to describe the complete destruction of those cities. One should see them to realize how complete and precise our bombers did their job. And we talked with some of the people we met to learn why so very little had been done to clean up the debris, why so little reconstruction had been started. And one such man was Carl John, an Offenbach hotel proprietor who had had his building bombed 5 times, and he said, the German officials won't permit reconstruction yet. They want to wait so they can do it in grand style with new materials. Another man, Lionel Pantages, an American in Germany since 1945, said the only way these Germans will get their cities cleaned up is for the occupying powers to force them to do it. But the general belief among others was that the people just don't have the money to do any repairing or reconstruction. And we tried passing out bars of soap and candy to some of the children we saw in Germany. Most of them took it gratefully. Good soap is very hard to get there. But one woman in Cologne with her child in hand glanced down at our offering, said quite forcefully, 9, and led the child away. Our tour was climaxed when a few of us managed to promote a trip to Berlin on one of the C-54 airlift planes. We rode into Berlin with 10 tons of coal and observed the most impressive operation of split-second timing and spirit of get-the-job-done among men that we've ever experienced. The planes took off for Berlin every 3 minutes and landed just as regularly on the return to Rhine-Main Field in Frankfurt. The plane we were on was piloted by Captain Claude Phillips of Dayton, Ohio, who described the operation as one of the best overseas flying missions ever practiced by the Air Forces, and even though it was and still is a costly operation, he said in these words, it is one for which the money is well spent. Each plane uses about 800 gallons per round trip. One 3-man crew would make 2 round trips a day, and the engineer on that Operation Vittles plane was an Oklahoma boy, Tech Sergeant William McReady of Prague. We passed over 5 Russian airfields while in the Russian corridor of the 1-hour, 40-minute flight to Berlin, and looking down from the plane, the pilot pointed out 5 American A-20s parked on the Russian field at Kothern. We presumed they were Lend-Lease planes used by the Russians during the war. And when we landed at the huge Tempelhof Berlin airfield, Hitler's prize, we noticed damage done to some of the buildings. We presumed it had been done during the war, but Captain Phillips explained that the damage was reportedly done by the Russians when they learned that the Americans were going to occupy and manage the field when 4 power control went into effect at Berlin. We were there at Tempelhof only 17 minutes, just long enough for a truckload of DPs and German prisoners to unload the plane, to taxi into line on the runway behind other planes just unloaded, and await the control tower's clearance to take off again for the return to Frankfurt. And after our return, we drove over the Autobahn again, which took us through a portion of the fertile farmland of Germany to Cologne. And it was hard to understand why one man would be foolish enough to gamble losing that rich heartland of Europe by going to war in an attempt to grab off more. Shortly after our return to Brussels, we were flying over the English Channel, landing at Shannonera to Gander, Newfoundland, and soon we saw the skyline of New York. 130 young democracy salesmen from the United States JCs had seen the world grow small physically, and their experience resulted in a greater challenge mentally.